Hi, I'm Sean Pinder from the Department of Finance. It gives me great pleasure to provide you with an overview of one of the most important concepts in finance, the time value of money. Now let's begin by considering a pretty simple question. Which of the following cash flows would you prefer to receive? $1,000 now, or the promise of $1,000 1 year from now? Well, the answer is pretty straightforward. Most of us would prefer the $1,000 today, and there are at least 3 reasons for this. Firstly, over time, prices tend to rise, reflecting the impact of inflation. As a result, we prefer $1,000 today to $1,000 a year from now because we can simply buy more things with that amount of cash today than we could with the same amount of cash in a year's time. The second reason we would prefer to receive the $1,000 today, rather than in a year's time, is that if we receive the cash today, we can invest it for a year so that in a year's time we have more than $1,000. If we delay receiving the $1,000, then we give up that opportunity. We refer to this effect as an opportunity cost. That is, the delayed receipt of the cash will mean that we give up the opportunity to invest it, so that we end up with more than $1,000 in a year's time. The third reason we prefer the $1,000 today to the promise of $1,000 in a year's time is because of the risk associated with actually getting $1,000 in a year's time. So that's all pretty straightforward, right? Well, now let me change the question slightly and see what you think. Which would you prefer, $1,000 today or $1,200 1 year from now? This is much more difficult to answer because we need to know whether the additional $200 promised is sufficient to compensate us for, you guessed it, inflation, opportunity cost, and risk. Or put another way, we can't directly compare the cash flows that occur, or are expected to occur, at different points in time. We need to re-express cash flows that are expected to occur in the future in terms of their value to us today. That is, we need to re-express these cash flows in terms of their present value to us today. And we need to do it in such a way that we account for the 3 contributors to the time value of money. That's right, inflation, opportunity cost, and risk. Now, the way that we re-express future expected cash flows in terms of their present value to us today is through discounted cash flow analysis. And here's the basic formula that we use. Now, the way to interpret this formula is that we have a cash flow that we expect to occur in n periods time. The way that we re-express the value of that cash flow in terms of the present value today is by simply dividing it by 1 plus r, where r is the discount rate, to the power of n, which you'll recall is the number of periods we expect to wait until we receive the cash flow. R, the so-called discount rate, incorporates the impact of the 3 contributors to the time value of money: inflation, opportunity cost, and risk. The greater the impact of these 3 factors, the higher the value of R that will apply to the expected cash flow, and the smaller will be the present value calculated. Now, thinking back to our previous example, let's assume that the appropriate discount rate is 15% per annum, per year. What will the present value of $1,200 that we expect to receive a year from now? Well, with a discount rate of 15%, the promise of $1,200 in a year's time is worth a little bit over $1,043 to us today. So if presented with a choice between $1,000 today or the promise of $1,200 in a year's time, and if we know that the appropriate discount rate is 15% per annum, then we would elect to receive the $1,200 in a year's time. It's simply more valuable. But what if we changed the facts a little and made the cash flow much riskier, much more uncertain? In that case, we'd want to use a higher discount rate. Let's say we're going to use one of 30%. Now what's the present value of that cash flow? Now the present value of the cash flow is about $923, and our decision is reversed. Now, of course, we'd prefer to receive the $1,000 today rather than the promised $1,200 in a year's time, because the future cash flow, the $1,200 in a year's time, is really only worth about $923 to us today. And that reflects the impact of the 3 contributors to the time value of money: inflation, opportunity cost, and risk. This graph plots the present value of $1,200 to be received in a year's time, and you can see that as we increase the discount rate, in response to an increase in expected inflation, opportunity cost or risk, the present value of the future cash flow continues to decline. But who cares? Why does this matter? After all, how often are investors or businesses really interested in establishing the present value of a single cash flow? Not often, right? Well, the real contribution of the discounted cash flow technique is that it enables us to value an asset, such as a project, that involves a series of cash flows that we expect to occur over the life of the project. Take this project, for example. It's a multi-year project promising $150,000 at the end of each of the next 3 years. To value the project, we know we can't just add together 3 lots of $150,000. Why? Well, money has a time value, so that the cash flows that occur at different points in time have different values because of expected inflation, opportunity cost and risk. So to value this project, we calculate the present value of each of the individual cash flows and then we add them all up. When we discount the individual cash flows in this way and then add the discounted amounts together, we get a current valuation of the project that in this case is about $316,000. So how might this information be useful to us? Well, if this project were an existing project that the company was involved in, then it tells us the minimum amount we might accept if another company were to offer to buy the project. Alternatively, it tells us how this asset contributes to the overall market value of our company. And this is really important when you think about what a company actually is. You see, from a valuation perspective, all that a company is a big basket of projects. And if we're able to value these individual projects using the discounted cash flow technique that specifically allows for the time value of money, then we can arrive at a valuation for the company as a whole. And that's a pretty useful thing to be able to do.